Today we're going to be looking at this old historic cemetery near downtown Reno with two of the ladies that are leading its preservation effort. Hillside Cemetery turns 150 years old this year. This was the first cemetery to serve the community of Reno, and it opened in 1875, and for many years this was the only game in town. Many, if not most, of Reno's early pioneers rest here. This cemetery has had a rough history, but today things are looking much better for it. So please hang out with me as we find out more about how this old boneyard came into existence and how we almost lost it to developers. Here on The Reno You Know. Some of my viewers back east might be thinking, 150 years, that's nothing. And I get it, but for us, this is old. Nevada became a state in 1864, and Reno was founded in 1868. So this became the final resting place for many people just 11 years after Nevada's statehood. 1875 was also 7 years after the town of Reno was founded. So what happened to those folks that passed away before this facility was available? In most instances, they were brought outside of town to some location that looked good, and they were buried, and that was that. And assuredly, some of those people still rest under today's subdivisions and commercial districts that didn't exist back then. Here I am in the heart of Reno. There's a festival of lights going on this weekend, so we've got some extra decor about. A fellow named Wilshire Sanders showed up in Reno in the 1870s and opened up a cabinet maker shop and was a carpenter, and he opened up the shop in the old building behind me, the old Oddfellows building here at the corner of 2nd and Virginia, which was built in 1876. And you might remember this building and intersection from the famous intersections video that I did previously. Mr. Sanders lived close by, about a block away, so he probably just walked to work. Well, of course he walked to work. There weren't any cars back then. This newspaper article from 1928 describes an old home that was lived in by Wilshire Sanders and his family some 40 years prior. And this location is on Sierra Street between 1st and 2nd. And the old home was located behind me where the city parking garage now stands. At the time, the old home was slated for demolition to make room for a new brick building that was to be the new home of the Reno Oddfellows. And this building served the Oddfellows for many years, as well as some retail in Reno, including Reno's Montgomery Ward. And this building existed for years, serving the public until it was ultimately taken down. As a woodworker, Wilshire Sanders developed a kind of side hustle making coffins. And this business steadily grew, and he ultimately became one of Reno's first undertakers. And for a time, he was Reno's only undertaker. This newspaper article from 1895 shows that at the time his funeral business was located in the old McKissick Opera House building, which was built in 1887. This building at the time was the cultural center of Reno until the early 20th century, when it was remodeled to become a hotel. And ironically, that building stood behind me near this corner where the Eldorado Hotel Casino today now stands. The building was later named the Hotel Reno, and later again renamed the Plaza Hotel, because at the time this was at the corner of Sierra and Plaza Streets. The old brick building lasted until 1974, when it was demolished because it couldn't be retrofitted to modern building and fire codes. Real quick, could you share this channel with a friend? I've met several people recently that weren't aware of the Reno You Know, so could you please text or email a link to this channel or to a specific video to somebody that you know? Thank you. In 1875, the state of Nevada authorized Wilshire Sanders the use of several acres here on this bluff above downtown Reno for use as a cemetery. And this was a shrewd business move for Mr. Sanders because not only was he the undertaker, but now he owned the cemetery. And this was a lucrative arrangement for him because back then he was selling lots for $100 each. And from the 1870s into the 1890s, parts of this cemetery were subdivided and sold off to make separate cemeteries, one for the Hebrew community, one for the Knights of Pythias, and one for the Grand Army of the Republic. And all of those cemeteries are still here today. The grounds here were fashioned into a kind of Victorian garden theme, and there were trees and grass here to give the effect of a park-like setting. This landscaping started out well, but the upkeep of the facility soon became a problem, and it remained a problem for more than 100 years. When Hillside was established, there was no state law that stipulated that endowments needed to be established for the long-term care and upkeep of the property. The first recorded burial here was in 1877, and as early as 1878, townspeople were complaining about the upkeep of the grounds. A colorful notice in the newspaper in 1878 read, "Someone, without fear of the law or the wrath of God, willfully opens the side gates of the cemetery and allows cattle to enter to pasture, as it were. The other day, a lot of work oxen were let in, and they did some damage to 2 or 3 graves. The first fellow caught doing this will be tarred and feathered." In 1937, a letter to the editor of a local newspaper read in part, "One's eye cannot help but falter on a spot that these years of depression have left in a more deplorable state than ever before, the Hillside Cemetery. Everything that is American, everything that is Nevadan rests there. This rest haven is now entirely surrounded by homes. Cannot our civic pride as well as our national pride make it worthy that this place be kept up? If it cannot be made a project, is there not enough of us to volunteer to round up these sinking graves, clear up the underbrush, the tumbleweeds, and the rubbish?" Indeed, Hillside Cemetery suffered from neglect for generations, but probably worse, it was the target of vandalism and abuse for years and years. I remember myself visiting here shortly after moving here in 1986 and thinking to myself, oh my God, what a mess. It was completely overgrown, and many of the stones were either missing or toppled over. The University of Nevada's fraternity population was located, and still is located, directly adjacent, and these fellas usually get fingers pointed at them as the perpetrators of much of the poor treatment of the old cemetery. There were reports over the years of beer parties there, and even today the grounds are covered with scattered shards of beer bottles. Motorcycles would buzz over the graves, and cars would even be propped up on stones so they could be worked on. Gravestones would be used for target practice, and it became a dumping ground for old furniture, appliances, and trash, and many of the stones were stolen or defaced over the years. All in all, this place was just bad news. But how did that come to happen? Wilshire Sanders himself passed away in 1905, and at that point his widow Margaret took over. And also around this time, other cemeteries started to become available, which I'm sure hindered their cash flow. And what care that the grounds did receive usually came from families of those interred here because they technically owned the lots. Eventually the Sanders family just moved away, and over time the families of those interred here started to move away or pass away themselves. There wasn't clear ownership or management here for many, many years. The complaining public finally motivated the city council to take a hard look at what was going on here in 1973. The thought was that the city would be interested in rehabbing the old cemetery, and it would become the owner of the land either by quitclaim deed or by legislation by the state. Then graves in the southern portion would be relocated to the northern portion, and the newly freed up land would be sold off to create an endowment to pay for the upkeep of the remaining cemetery. This resolution was approved, and also the state legislature passed what was known as the Hillside Cemetery Act, which was then signed into law by Governor O'Callaghan. Washoe County then quitclaimed its interest in the property to the city of Reno for delinquent taxes. Unfortunately, a wrench was thrown into the system and the city had to back off of the project. An attorney came forward who was representing the heirs of Margaret Sanders, and he said, hey, these heirs were not given proper notice of the intent to quitclaim the property. And he also stated that he had paid the delinquent taxes, so the family should retain the property. This attorney eventually became owner of the property, which he later deeded over to the University of Nevada in 1979. The university soon came to the conclusion that they were not in the cemetery business, and if they had wanted to use the property, they would have had to hunt down all of the descendants of the people buried there to get authorization to disinter them. So UNR sold it off to a John Lawton, who is also the owner of Sierra Memorial Gardens Cemetery here in Reno. Boy, it is nice and quiet up here today. In 2003, plans were announced that the pioneer citizens that rest here would be evicted to make room for student housing and apartments. Luckily, that never transpired, but you can't fault the owner for at least trying to do something. This land is prime real estate, and it had been neglected and blighted for years. And you'd think that over the years, if people had really cared about what this area meant, they would have provided for it a long time ago. Technically speaking, John Lawton only owned the strips of land and the paths between the graves because Wilshire Sanders had started selling off the plots in the 1870s. And there has to be a deed to those plots somewhere. Most, if not all, of these plots have assessor's parcel numbers. Another scare came in 2016 when signs went up yet again announcing the imminent relocation of graves for another proposed housing project. At that time, the state law provided that the property owner could declare that the property was a nuisance, and that would give them the right to disinter and remove remains. There was yet another public outcry, and the owner, John Lawton, passed away in 2017, and this relocation never came to happen. Later, legislation was introduced to give such decision-making power to independent city governments and not the property owner. Brett and Fran, I want to thank you so much for coming out and meeting me out here at Hillside Cemetery. And Fran, you are one of the founders of the Preservation Foundation. Is that right?
Yes.
And then Brett, you're the president of the Hillside Cemetery Preservation Foundation. Is that right?
Correct.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Fran, how did this all come to be that this would be preserved?
Well, in 2013, I was researching Edmund and Elizabeth Plum.
Okay.
Because I wanted to find out who Plum Lane was named for. I mean, I'm always fascinated with the history of the area that I'm in.
Okay.
No matter where. And I came up to the cemetery to find where they were buried, and I was absolutely appalled that the cemetery looked so bad. And I kept thinking Reno has to be ashamed of the fact that this is not being taken care of.
Absolutely.
So I decided I was somebody and I could do it.
Good for you. And I saw this in its previous state years ago. I think in the 1990s I came up here and I said, oh my gosh, it looks really cool if you wanted to make a movie or something.
A scary movie.
But in general, it needed fixing.
It looked pretty bad, and these people deserve to be taken care of.
Absolutely.
They're the founders of Reno.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And where are we today, Brett? Here, February of 2025. What state of work are you in, and what do you typically do here on a weekly basis?
Mainly reclaiming. We've done a lot of reclaiming. We're at the point where I think Fran and I finally get a little bit of manual labor break and we can start doing some research. So we've dug a lot of holes, we've moved a lot of rock, we've cleared a lot of land. I've been involved for 8 years now, 7 years now.
Okay.
And in the last 7 years, I personally have seen us just do loads of ground clearing, loads of just groundwork to make it look what it looks like now. That gives us the chance to do our genealogical research and find everybody's story and find photos of them and just bring their plots that we've brought back to life and bring them back to life, at least verbally.
Very, very nice. And there's a lot of plots here that are not currently marked, but it is your plan to have them marked with some new kind of stone or whatnot?
Absolutely, yeah. We have 1,600 or so people on in the complex and under 50 original stones. So our goal is we personally have fundraised some money, done what we can to, get grants and things of that nature to try to get some headstones. So we've replaced a couple. I think we've replaced 4.
Am I correct that on occasion you guys will get a phone call saying, hey, I found a stone in my backyard or my basement?
I actually
year.
Yeah, I lived on 10th for years. That's how I got involved, is I wandered up here one day, met Don, he's a board member of ours and one of our volunteers, and he said, there is someone you need to meet. Can you come back next weekend? And I met Fran, and we fell in love. And so there have been so many times where my mailman, in particular, he delivering in this area, calls me one day and said, hey, do you and your friend want to go check out this headstone that's on this porch on this house over here? Fran goes over, gives me a call. Yeah, that's definitely ours. I stole it. It's in the back of my car. We'll get it back. Yeah, so there have been times where the owner of the walkways and the avenues has given us a call, and he's found headstones, and members of our community, people on Facebook.
Nice. And will those be put back in?
They have.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we'll take any stone. I mean, even if the stone necessarily doesn't go here and it needs a safe place to go till we find out where it goes, we've stumbled upon stones that have been left on our gate, and we come in and we're like, well, this isn't ours, but...
Kind of a cemetery halfway house.
Absolutely.
That's right. No questions asked.
The cemetery thrift.
Guys, I think Mr. Sanders, when he founded this, had the concept of a kind of a Victorian garden for the cemetery. Was there grass, trees, shrubs, any of that kind of stuff here back then that you know of?
Well, I think mostly it was a desert cemetery, but he did put in water to all of the plots.
Okay.
So at one time, every single family plot had water for them to do what they wanted. Some planted plants and flowers. Some of them did have grass.
Okay.
And, some of them had hedges. I mean, they did pretty much what they wanted because it was their property.
Cemetery burial records. How do you know where everybody is? Was there a written record, or how did you find that information?
Yep. Special Collections at the University of Nevada has the Silas Ross papers.
Okay.
And in those papers, because he ran the funeral home, he inherited it. I'll put it that way. Saunders started it, gave it to Perkins and Gulling, and then it was handed off to Silas Ross.
Okay.
And so all of those records went to Silas Ross, and the University of Nevada has a copy.
I think we're at a place where everything is stacked. The graves aren't going to be moved from this point forward.
No.
We hope.
They're protected by law.
They're protected by law.
Yeah, a big move on the nonprofit's part in the beginning of its creation.
It's a good thing for several of these graves, I understand, that they aren't moved, especially with Mr. Gould behind us, because I understand that from a cow, he contracted anthrax.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's the reason that he's down here, and I understand that those spores...
Never die.
They never die.
They never die.
So
Anthrax
if
becomes
they were to
airborne.
move this guy, might not be good.
Absolutely.
Potentially there is a danger. Likelihood, probably not, because they'd probably have to use hazmat.
Yeah.
So if they have to use hazmat, it has to be tented, and everybody that handles the remains has to be in hazmat.
Oh my gosh.
So it's pretty pricey, but the family just doesn't want it to happen.
No.
They're saying, no, leave him where he is.
Let's leave him where he is.
Leave him where he is.
There's a marker here named Plum. The Plum family here, we have a Plum Lane in Reno, is that right?
Yes, named for Edmund and Elizabeth Plum. They opened a ranch at the west end of Plum Lane, Plum Lane and Hunter Lake. Yeah, it's a Victorian garden cemetery, so they used to come up and picnic on their families. So,
There you go.
We're not bothering anyone. Hi, George.
So, George, who was George?
George Cassidy was a journalist, a writer, a potential politician, a graduated lawyer.
Well, he was a representative of Congress.
House of Rep, yes.
I've seen earlier photographs of this, and this plaque was not here.
No.
So how did this get
This
here?
was new. We actually approached Representative Amadei, and we told him that we wanted to have it noted that Cassidy was a member of the House of Representatives for the United States Congress. And we said we'd really like to use the seal. Well, we didn't know it was going to be this big of a deal. You had to get permission from Congress. to have this placed at Cassidy's grave.
All right, I've heard about Chief Sides, and this is his final resting place. What do you know about him?
Chief Johnson Sides was actually born in 1833, the same year that Walker made his expedition into Nevada.
Really?
And he was actually born, he finally told people, I finally found the article, he was born at Carson Sink in what's now Stillwater.
Okay.
Chief Sides believed that this valley was big enough for everybody and we could all coexist. He believed in peace. He received a medal from Congress and was called the Peacemaker. Sarah McGregor is the unnamed woman, as the family says, who went to Davis and told him that she was tired of repairing her husband's pockets. He was a teamster, and he'd wear out the pockets on his work clothes.
Okay.
So she wanted some kind of rivets on the pockets so that the pockets would stand up as long as the pants. And so he went to work and he created, it was the beginning of Levi jeans.
Oh my gosh.
That was the start. And then he could not mass produce them. And everybody wanted them then. When they saw his pocket, they, oh yeah, I want those. So he went to Levi Strauss and they created Levi jeans. So
this lady was the inspiration.
She was the inspiration behind the
riveted
jeans.
Pocket denim.
Yes.
Thank you. I wear them every day.
I know, same. I'm like, I have some on right now. This is my favorite. Mary French Fairchild is my #1 favorite story in the cemetery. To preface, we have never seen a photograph of Mary French Fairchild. I have no idea what she looks like, but I absolutely love her story. She was a single woman who lost her husband and both of her children somewhere outside of Urington, Nevada in the 1850s. By 1870, she was in Reno, a single woman, owning like almost 2 full blocks of Commercial Row, which is unheard of. Her biggest thing was she loved helping out women and children, especially widowed women. So you could stay, if you were a widowed woman or had children and no spouse, you could stay for free of charge at her boarding house in exchange for a little bit of labor. So when she passed, she, again, a single woman, no children. So this is one of those plots where we couldn't contact anyone. I feel like I'm probably the closest relative that Aunt Mary has nowadays with how much I care and how much I know about her. She was a huge, just like maternal figure to the city and a lot of people in the city during that time. And when I first came to Hillside, this was just dirt. There was dirt and there was shrubs and there was rocks, and Fran mentioned her name once to me and I said, well, who is she? And she's like, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. And I spent the following year researching everything that I could about Aunt Mary and learning as much as I know about her, which I say I'm an expert nowadays. And she had no headstone. She had nothing. So the headstone that she bought herself, that she worked her butt off for, no longer existed and had been vandalized. So this was my big project. I was like, we're getting Aunt Mary a stone. She deserves it. She bought her own. Yeah. So these 2 ladies bought her another one.
Potter's Fields are, well, it comes from the time of Judas. The pieces of silver that Judas took and he gave back, they couldn't use it because it was dirty. Mm-hmm. So instead they bought a potter's field for people that were unknown to be buried, and that kind of carried on into Christian communities too.
Okay.
So this is for indigenous, unknowns, and the poor.
And there's a lot of them here, right?
Yes.
200.
Wow.
200 that we've identified.
That you know of.
Yeah,
about.
That we have identified. It's taken us a long time to reclaim it. Mm-hmm. It is no longer a parking lot.
Okay.
It used to be covered with cars.
And speed bumps.
Cars would be parked on top of it.
They'd park on it, yeah.
Literal speed bumps. There was concrete laid over Potter's Field and lines of cars along this entire place. Speed bumps.
Oh my God.
I can't get over that. Speed bumps. Like, you installed speed bumps.
It didn't stop them, but you know.
It didn't stop us either, so.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So they were placed in 2020.
Okay.
The kids went out, all of the university students went out for spring break, and we were going to be sneaky and have it in place when they came back. Yeah. They didn't come back until the next
3
year.
years, yeah, like literally 2 years, yeah.
So by then they didn't know.
Nice. So they don't park out.
They don't park out here anymore.
That's excellent.
This is not free parking.
Yes.
It is a respected place, because each one of these people also has a story.
Absolutely.
We have the victims of the fire of 1879.
Uh-huh.
Once a year we do a ceremony where we say the name of every single person in Potter's Field.
Oh, cool.
Just to, they're not as seen maybe as the remainder of the cemetery, so the first time you die is when you die, and the second time you die is when your name stops being said.
Right.
So it's very important for us to repeat their names at least once a year and acknowledge them and hold space for them.
So ladies, here we are filming this in the winter. It doesn't feel like winter today, but winter of 2025. What would this place look like in 10 years? What's your vision? What's a finished product? It'll probably never be finished, but what are we going to look like in 10 years here?
10 years for me, I hope 10 years from now we own it. I hope 10 years from now that every single person in the cemetery is marked, and that Fran and I have had the ability and the time to research each and individual of them, give them all the dignity that they deserve.
Very
and
cool.
10 years from now, I hope that it's more than just me and Fran. And 4 or 5 other people. I really hope that there are people my age or younger, a new generation worth of people coming in, admiring the cemetery, taking interest in it, just being passionate about it.
Now you're probably going to be preaching to the choir here, guys, but why preserve this? I mean, it's just a dust. These people have been dead for 150 years, a lot of them, and this is prime real estate. Why should we be concerned with preserving this?
It's sacred ground. It was consecrated. Every prayer, every grief, every tear is in the ground.
Yeah.
It needs to be protected. It needs to be taken care of. And it also provides teachable moments for everybody to connect with Nevada history.
Absolutely.
It's Nevada history. It's the region's history.
Yeah.
And as an educator, teachable moments are important.
Yes.
Children learn and people learn much more from teachable moments than from stock curriculum.
Yes.
So I think this is something that actually would speak to people's hearts.
Yes.
The sad stories of the epidemics, the fires, the avalanches, the floods, accidents. Each individual buried in this cemetery has a story.
Absolutely.
And I would like to see in 10 years people understanding the importance of historic cemeteries.
And as I understand it, this particular cemetery is kind of privately owned. It's kind of convoluted, I think, because I think the owner only owns the walking spaces between the plots. And some of these plots have actual assessors' numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They all do.
They all have assessors' numbers.
Yeah, there are 230 owners.
Wow, that's convoluted.
It's a fee simple cemetery, so it was a type of Victorian cemetery.
Okay.
Victorian garden was kind of the design of it, but fee simple was the way that these plots were purchased. So when you purchased a plot in Hillside Cemetery, you're purchasing an APN number and the land.
Wow.
So you're not just purchasing a site within the cemetery confines, you are a landowner.
Nice.
So each of the individual 200 plus families, they are all individual landowners of each of these plots, whether that be a single plot or a family plot.
Did they have to pay individual property taxes on
No.
Property tax on the
property
cemetery.
tax.
Yes.
It holds human remains.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So it's non-taxable.
Yes.
They don't get you there.
No.
There's one place they don't get
That's right.
you. Is it the ambition of your foundation to hopefully acquire ownership of this place at some time?
Of the avenues and the walking spaces, yes,
Yes.
because that is all that you could potentially have ownership of.
Gotcha.
But the owners currently, we have sent many a letter, many a bribe, many a little smile and a wink to try to get it. And so far, that's not really a plan of theirs that we know of, but
they're aware of your desire.
Yes.
They are very, very much aware of us,
Okay.
and we do have, I wouldn't say their blessing, but we have their permission at this point. When Fran started, and even I started, they were pretty skeptical of us. We would come with, we'd show up with locks on the gate. We weren't allowed to replace things, it was a lot of their directive, but in the last 10 years,
Now they know.
we don't see them really anymore, and they don't really contact
know who you
us.
are or what you're doing here, right?
We don't have to ask permission.
Yeah, and
that's great.
it's like once the families, and we have agreements with the majority of the families to take care of their plots, so we can't be denied access.
Cool.
Because the Peckhams, we take care of the plot for them.
Okay.
And there are current descendants that we know that are on our board.
Oh, nice.
That are on our board,
On your
and
board.
and they communicate with us all the time, but he's like in his 90s, so
Right.
it's hard for him to maintain the plot.
So, any of our viewers out there watching this want to participate and help you guys out, either with a donation or time, or what can they do?
Well, we have our website, which is Hillside Cemetery Preservation Foundation. They can donate if they want to donate, they can donate on our website. We have a Facebook page.
You guys need materials, I'm sure, all the time.
Materials, yeah. You know, they can contact us and let us know. We have an email address that's on our website. If they want to get down and dirty, show up Saturday morning at 9 o'clock.
Cool. You're
So,
here almost every week?
Every Saturday, 9 to noon, we come in and we get our volunteers organized because most people can give up a Saturday morning.
Yeah, we'll take your time, we'll take your energy, we'll take I mean, if you have bricks in your yard, if you have pavers in your yard, if you have old fence posts you don't want, if you have Christmas decorations, if you have faux flowers, if you have a writing ability and you're really into research, if you have an inkling into genealogy, if anything, literally anything, our arms are open for any sort of assistance whatsoever, anyone that's interested.
If you can help these ladies out, please do. All right, thanks for hanging out to the end of this video. I sure appreciate it. We're finishing this video up at the Western Lights Festival. There's a kind of a mini Burning Man light festival down here. They've got fire over there and fireworks over here and light displays over there. It's actually pretty cool. And it's a delightful, warm February night, so we're out enjoying a nice beer. It's still, although it's Reno, Nevada, you still can't walk around downtown with a beer, so we popped into a place called The Spot, right on the Truckee River, which is essentially an outlet for Revision Brewing, local brewing company here, and I'm enjoying a Dr. Lupulin Triple IPA. It's super delightful to have this tonight in this awesome environment. The work of those folks down at the cemetery is nothing short of miraculous. Those are all volunteers. They donate their time and their resources to go down and clean things up and keep it maintained. If you feel so inclined to like to help out with their efforts, you can go to their website. They've got a donation page. You can also go to the Preservation Foundation Facebook page and watch their progress there. And they could always use a set of helping hands if you like to go down and help them on some Saturday morning, if you're so inclined. That is all I have for you today. I sure appreciate you hanging out. I know it's been several weeks since my last video. I'm opting to go with quality over quantity, so it does take me some time to research and get people and places lined up. But I'm off to work on my next episode. I appreciate your viewership. And as Harold S. Smith Sr. of Harold's Club always said, I'm with you. Cheers.